Welcome to episode 8 of the A Travel Talk Show. Colin, I'm really impressed at the traction we're getting out there. Some people are saying that our little do here with the Canadian twist is a hit show. I'm really excited to introduce our guest tonight, but again, we're gonna do our little pre-qualifying information that we need to put out there. To everyone that's watching, this is a participation show. So on your below us, we do have a comment section. So please feel free to ask questions to our guests and to ourselves. This is a recorded show. We will be recording this show. After the show, it goes live on our Facebook page. The following day, we put out an edited version. Unfortunately, that one sometimes misses out the bloopers, which we embrace. We're blooper TV, and we like it that way. With that, we will share this edited version on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Tumblr, Pinterest, Reddit, and YouTube. Not to mention that we also posted on the front page of our award-winning ehCanadaTravel.com website and blog. So let's start the show for you newbies out there. I see that there's some regular viewers, but for your newbies, let me introduce myself. I am your co-host, Greg Gug Gerard. I'm the co-founder of ehCanadaTravel.com, proudly so. I enjoy doing my public speaking and working with small and rural communities. And I'm also ranked 23rd as a travel blogger globally by Global Rise. You're up, bro. You're up.
I am also co-founder of ehCanadaTravel.com and the co-pilot, the number one, the head tech of this organization.
You forgot to say better looking, bro.
Well, they know that from last time, or that's obvious, you know. But,
okay.
And super happy to be here.
Just a reminder, we broadcast live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We are honoring self-isolation, hence the show. We are practicing physical distance the best we can here from our base camp here in Canada. So as always, we start our show with our famous A agenda. The A agenda gives you a brief down of what we're going to discuss today. So first of all, we're going to do a little diatribe on this week in tourism as we see it here in Canada from our base camp. Secondly, our special guest, which I'm excited to read off her resume, is a strategist, a futurist, and the founder of mytravelresearch.com. Highly recommend you check out her website. And her name is Carolyn Childs, and she'll be joining us in just a few moments, and please bear with us. The third part is our isolation vacation. That is where Colin and I show you some of our favorite adventures we have had in Canada. We have been to almost every community. We took 10 years off of life to go and research this country so we could do what we're doing today, which is the passion of selling the frontline tourism businesses, working with them and helping them succeed. Again, this is episode 8, Call, and we have been, as the number indicates, 84 days practicing physical distancing. I think that's a record. I never saw it coming. Did you?
It's hard to believe. No, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things we're going to discuss, and it's sort of to lead into our guest discussion today, is the UNWTO call, Destination Canada, and ehCanadaTravel.com. I think we've all come to this conclusion across the global tourism community, I think, is that domestic tourism is going to open up first. In our country, a lot of the big average sales, the big average traveler, and the spends out here come from international tourism. And there's a high majority of our tourism industries here that rely on that, Col?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So here's the big question, and I think this is regional, community, country-wise, is when? When does domestic tourism open up? And can we, as an industry and as the traveler, can we honor physical distancing? Can we maintain this? And can we grow tourism back from one of the biggest hits it's ever received? And how long is it going to take for recovery? We all have our own views. And here's a couple examples. So in SARS, and we all remember SARS, and here in Canada, SARS didn't really come out west. It stayed more east. It took about 11 months to come back to acceptable levels. When you look at September 11th, That took almost 14 months to come back to acceptable levels. Then you look at the 2008, 2009 economic crisis. Now that had a little bit more of a global punch. That wasn't so regionalized or country centric. And that one took 19 months to come back to acceptable levels. So here's the thing. The unknown in this whole equation is the traveler. And it comes down to traveler confidence. How are they going to go? How are their habits going to change? How are their trends going to change? How are they going to travel on airlines? How are countries going to receive travelers? How are we going to board as travelers? All of these questions are largely unknowns that are out there, and it affects the recovery time. So the big thing is, I think it's pretty common based on all the analytics that I've been reading and our own studies within our own sphere of influence is 30%. We're probably going to lose near that in small and rural community tourism businesses. And it's a shame because globally, I think, and Caroline will hopefully clarify this for us, at 98% of tourism is small and medium businesses. I mean, that's the foundation of businesses. That's where we put our boots. That's where we put our hat. We're on the front line, and we like those small and rural community businesses, and that's where we specialize. So it's very exciting to bring on to our guest. So let me introduce our guest call. I'm pretty happy that Carolyn Childs has joined us today. I really am. I have been, in a very short period of time, I have seen her on various webinars. I have taken the time to get to know her through her articles and through her website. And I'm really excited that she is bringing her foresight and insight and her attitude and her futuristic attitude of where and what and how tourism is going to turn the corner. So sit back and let me read you this list. This is how I'm so excited. Carolyn Childs is a futurist and a strategist. She is the founder of mytravelresearch.com, which is a market intelligence company dedicated to helping travel and tourism industry. She is featured in the economics and BBC, Hotelier, Sky News, and so much more. We have to have a show, so I had to cut it off at Sky News. She is one of Australia's best tourism exports. Now, you couldn't ask for a better pat on the back. Past president of the Asia Pacific chapter of the Travel and Tourism Research Association. She sits on the advisory panel of the World Tourism Association for Culture and Heritage. She's a certified member of the UK Market Research Society, and she has sat on the United Nations World Tourism Organization's panel of tourism experts. So please have a big virtual shout out to Carolyn Childs, and let's welcome her to the show. Carolyn, welcome to the show.
And should it be a good day?
Yeah.
Good day.
Yes, and greetings from lunchtime in a finally sunny Sydney. So I'm so excited. I'm probably blushing. That was such a great introduction. You guys really rock on your research. So well done on that.
What I'd like you to share with our audience maybe a little bit more is a snapshot on who is Carolyn.
Okay, and it's great because actually you started with often when we introduce ourselves, we talk about what we do rather than who we are. So I thought I might share with you a couple of insights, one of which you'll be familiar with, because I'm actually a huge fan of the Destination Canada Explorer Quotient segments. And I am a cultural explorer. So for all of your listeners out there who are using those segments, and if you're not, you damn well should be. They're fantastic. They're literally a world-class Canadian export. I talk to a lot of my clients about them. I am a cultural explorer. So like you guys, and I think the reason this is going to be such a great chat, I'm really passionate about getting out and getting to understand place and people.
Nice.
Connecting with people, seeing culture, exploring nature, and seeing both those sides of things. So that's me as a kind of traveller. I'm a British-born Australian, known as a posse for short.
Posse?
A posse.
How does that come about?
Well, you'll be familiar with Aussie. Your Canadians may not be familiar. All around the world, people from Britain have different nicknames, some more or less flattering than others.
Okay.
So your the noisy cousins south of your border would call me a limey. But Australians would call someone like me, even though I've lived here for 21 years, I'm a pom.
Okay.
Theoretically, that could be because it's a prisoner of Mother England, because that's how most British-born Australians got here, as a convict settlement. But also it could be pomegranates, because our nice English skin tends to go a bit red under the Australian sun. So you put those two words together. I'm a posse. I've been in travel and tourism for more than 30 years, and my passion, a bit like yours, is I love helping people. I love helping people unlock what's within their business. And I use data and insight to do that. I like to think that data and insight is the secret superpower that you unlock, because all of your businesses are superhero businesses. It's bloody hard to work in tourism. For a while I had a title in one of my companies as head of travel and leisure, and what I used to say was that didn't mean I traveled and I had no leisure. It's hard work. So I love seeing that energy when you give people an insight that helps make their job and their life easier. So that's me in a nutshell.
Excellent. And I'm really liking that nutshell, Caroline. So with Caroline, here we are with the late arrivals and the newbies. Thank you for coming on board. Again, my name is Greg Gerard. Our honored guest today here all the way from Australia, our cousins in Australia, is Carolyn Childs, strategist and futurist, and also founder of mytravelresearch.com. And we are big fans of Caroline, so we're very happy to have her. We are your host here at the Travel Talk Show. So Caroline, Australia has shown some great resilience in how it has responded to, I like to call it the triple threat. Your forest fires, the floods, and now the big one with COVID. Could you please share with our audience, because I think there's a lot of qualities in how you guys have overcome and the positive attitude that I've been seeing come online from the way you've handled these issues. Can you share with our audience a story of your country's resilience, for one? And what lessons we can learn as we battle COVID domestically and globally?
Okay, well, it's great to hear that is the perspective from the rest of the world, because I think sometimes inside it maybe didn't always feel like that. You may have seen there were some periods and some dark times for many of the operators who are in our bushfire affected areas. It's been a pretty tough time. To live in Australia is the climate here, even before man-made anthropogenic climate change. We have huge variations. We have, there's actually a national poem which talks about droughts and flooding rain. So this is very much part of the Australian psyche, is managing and dealing with that and building resilience in. But I actually think a lot of the lessons that made Australians do well are actually qualities that your audience, your primarily Canadian audience, I think they're qualities that Canadians and Australians share, which is a strong sense of community. And that degree of community working together, and that community was embedded in local institutions. So, for example, in many regional Australian communities, well, all Australian communities, basically, we have a volunteer firefighting service. It's called different things in different states, our equivalent of your provinces. But we have those networks and those frameworks that bring people together to do that. So those skills and that experience with dealing with these issues, that culture of working together and building and working communities, and embedding it in the frameworks of communities, I think are all things that work well together. I think the other thing, it's interesting because we've seen a lot of loss of trust in government, and when government gets it wrong, that's still there. So, for example, when our Prime Minister didn't manage well going to visit some of the bushfire affected areas, there was kickback from that. But when we see government talk honestly, and I think one thing that both our countries share is pretty good bloody bullshit detectors. And when we saw that work genuinely, we've worked with and used that. So when we're told not to do things because it's good for us, pretty much we've abided by that, and that's stuck through with COVID-19. You know, when the government said don't do these things, there was very, very high levels of support and compliance with that. Such that, I mean, the national moment of angst for Australians with COVID-19 was when we got through 100 total deaths, which, if you think that New York is now celebrating because they've got down to 100 deaths in a day, you can realize what a major achievement that is. Now, we've been helped by luck. You know, we are an island, but you have to use luck. So I think those are all the lessons. And as I said, I see lots of similarities in the way that we approach things in our communities. And I think those are all qualities that you and your audience, particularly your local Canadian audience, have in you to do that same thing, that sense of working together and partnership. So, you know, one of our politicians was actually out fighting to defend his home and left his home in the face of a bushfire to go and help others, for example. So, right. Yeah, and I think that's really what I see, is that resilience. A few years ago, we had some major floods hit one of our capital cities, and the then Premier of that state, Queensland, she talked about the fact that, now, she talked about Queenslanders, but I think it's true of all of us. You know, when you knock us down, we just get back up. And that's what we need to keep doing. We're going to get knocked back. There's no doubt that this is the biggest crisis that we as a global tourism community have faced. But for finding that resilience, particularly finding it when you really don't feel like you're having it, just getting that moment, just get back up and do it. I think that's where we need to be.
Yeah, I think the old adage, you know, what knocks you down makes you stand up stronger, can go a long way on the front line and so forth. And I think I really like how your leadership group, regardless if they've made mistakes or not, they're coming to bat and they're saying, okay, maybe I did this wrong, maybe I didn't do this right, maybe I did this right, but they're not afraid to admit error. In our country, we get so much spin. We're not getting a lot of clear answers when the questions are being asked. We seem to be getting the same line for every question. So I think I can appreciate, from what I've seen, and I'm not boots on the ground as you are, but I do appreciate that after 3 big hits, I'm actually quite impressed with the attitude shown by your fellow Australians. So kudos to you Aussies watching this show.
Oh, well, thank you very much. But like I say, I think some of that was learned behavior, because early in both stages of the crisis, there were moments where it kind of wobbled. Yep. But I think we pushed back on that. And I think that's what we actually have to do in a constructive way when we feel like politicians get it wrong, is that we don't accept it. And I think we can see a very similar example of that in the UK at the moment, where the Prime Minister's senior advisor looks like he's, if not breached the literal law of their travel restrictions, but the spirit of their law. And it's actually ordinary people pushing back and saying, well, you know, my instinct was go to spend time with my dying father. I was told not to travel. I didn't. So I think that some of what we get when we get to politicians is and engage with that. That's something that we can't control what they do, but we can influence it and push it in that direction. So I think that's what we didn't accept in Australia. When we felt they got it wrong, we damn well told them. And if you want to check out the video of the Prime Minister visiting, I'm sure somewhere on YouTube, when he tried to shake someone's hand, and people felt support wasn't necessarily coming through from the top levels at that stage. People said, no, he's not doing that. It's because, you know, this firefighter doesn't want you to shake your hand because he's stressed, he's lost his home and he's fighting for other people's homes. And fair dues on all our politicians across the political spectrum, they listened. But I think they knew when it was not time to bullshit us. And I think that's something on both sides. As I said, we have good bullshit detectors and we're not afraid. Perhaps Canadians, I think, are a little bit more polite than Aussies. I always say Canadians and Kiwis are the 2 nicest groups of people on the planet. And I don't think you should lose your politeness, because your politeness is part of who you are, and it's part of the charm of why we travel to Canada. But I think that a little bit of finding a polite way to do that pushback is what you probably need to be doing.
Yeah. And thank you for that. We do take pride, and there are a lot here that are actually embarrassed by being polite. I'm not one of those. I take honor in that badge. I wear it proudly. I'm a big please, sorry, thank you, and I believe Colin is likewise, myself. I think it's important, the little things that matter, and the bullshit detector, yeah. But I do start seeing more Canadians within our industry starting to speak up. For the fact that a lot of them are selling their inventory. They're actually, some we know are putting their houses up for sale because they're not going to be able to make there's a lot of fallout coming down the pipeline. And so the resilience part on your part, our politeness, and I agree there's a lot of traits. And I'll tell you right now, our resorts love you Australians. You come in floods every summer and every winter. And we'll take you anytime.
Ditto the other way around. But yes, we do love traveling to Canada. I mean, I've been traveling to Canada for pretty much 30 years now. And I first came. By the way, I should also have said to many of your francophone Canadians, bonjour. So I worked for the Airlines Trade Association, and they were based in Montreal. So I've been traveling to Canada for many years, and I've always been made to feel welcome. And again, very much love that can-do attitude. But being a British-born Australian, that politeness really plays well for me. And I think there is, we definitely, Aussies love to travel. We come for a long time. We spend a lot of money when we come. I mean, the typical Aussie overseas trip is 2 to 3 weeks, partly because, since I moved to Australia, I now talk about, like everyone else, that we're only taking an 8-hour trip up to Singapore. So, we're very used to the idea that if you want to see the world and look outwards to the world, you're going to have to travel to do it. And if we're going to do that, we'll stay. So we will be back. I mean, Australians are already, we've seen a 270% increase, I think Google said, in searches for international destinations. And we don't even know when our borders will open. We are ready to go. So if you've got Aussies in your databases, don't stop talking to them just because they can't travel, because they're already researching and planning their trips. You might just need to be a bit flexible in when you offer them bookings, and I wouldn't be offering them anything before the end of this year. Hearing it's young people, but I think it's actually more about attitude than about age. I think, our curious, our cultural explorers, your broad lead EQ quotient segments that you look at in Canada for Australia, all of those groups are ready to travel.
Yeah. I think one of the things you touched on, and I'll just reiterate that, and Colin will probably back me up on this, I'm sure, the next battleground for the tourism dollar is search engines. That's going to be at the search engines and the social media. We got the same analytics here. Search engine research online has gone through the roof. Social media, what they're finding, and just a side note on this document I read the other day, is that it's a bit down, but what they're finding is the quality social media now, because before people were using it just in between bathroom breaks or at the water cooler or waiting for a meeting, they were using it to fill time. Now what's happening is they're actually, when they do go to social media, they have a purpose. So it's a strategic search. So I agree totally. I think we're getting a stronger and a more valuable search than we were before, which was more of a curiosity, maybe a time-wasting search. So I think the quality's also gone up.
Well, I think that maybe the immediacy is what I'd say on that, Greg, because I think one of the things that we have to remember is those of us who are particularly true travelers, we're always looking for the next trip, and we're always dreaming, and we've got different time frames for our trips that we've got that are out there. But I think at the moment what everyone's talking about is, they're talking about the trips that they can take as soon as they can take it and being ready to take those trips. So I think at the moment we're seeing that. I think that other stuff will come back, and I wouldn't say some of it's tire kickers, as we would say here, but I think a lot of it's also what's your longer term lead time, and that's one of the things I at the moment right now we've got to be in survival mode. As you said, people are putting their houses on the line. We're going to lose weaker businesses, but we're also risking losing good businesses, and we are going to lose good businesses. But I think so a lot of tactical stuff, a lot of what can I what can I do to drive commitment now is really important. But I don't lose sight of who you are and what you are, and that like kind of longer term vision, because that's then going to be what we don't want. Is we suddenly get people crowding in, and then there's a slump just as we've started to come back, because we haven't been thinking about that longer term inspirational platform. So I think we need to do both of those things. We need to be looking for those immediate things to convert, and I think a lot of that's going to be every business is going to have to look very specifically at their own situation to work out where their trade-off. I can't say to you there's a magic point where it's, you know, all of you should do this. I think you're really going to have to look at your own situation. And one of the things, you know, it's management consultants speak, but it's never been more important management consultants speak, is we're all going to need to be agile.
Yes.
We're all going to need to learn every day. We're going to be test and learn, see what's working. And I think the other thing for me, we're going to have to stop, you know, none of us like to fail, but I think we need to reframe what failure means, which is trying something that doesn't work shouldn't be failure. It's learning. Because, you know, one of the things I'm working with somebody with one of the states here at the moment on a tourism recovery strategy, and my head is spinning because the consumer mindset is changing so fast.
Oh yeah.
And it's going to change back, but it's also going to double back. We'll have an outbreak, suddenly people might start to pull back. We'll have so things are changing. So really, you've really got to be paying attention, and you've got to be flexible, and you've got to be experimenting just all the time, trying things, I think, and not fearing failure, because fearing failure freezes our brains. Accepting that some things are just not going to work, move on. What do you learn from it? What can you take into what you're doing?
That's a perfect segue into the next question. So what we have here in our country, and I can speak on that behalf, is that basically everyone had a very sound and 1 year, 3 year plan for tourism pre-COVID. So we had the community plan, the regional plan, the provincial plan, the territorial plan, the country plan. All were ready to go 1 year, 3 year. We knew what target markets we were going to hit. We knew what sort of guests, what trends we were looking at, travel habits we were looking at. And then COVID hit, and boom, there goes the playbook out the window. Doesn't apply anymore. We could take a little bit, read between the lines here and there. And we now are forced at, everyone is rewriting their new playbook, each different in depth. Who they want to target, the channels being used to reach them is the big question. But most are preaching staycations. So as a futurist, what do you envision, Caroline, the domestic and international travel habits to look like in the new abnormal? And let's say like a 1 year look at the quick, and maybe take a nice futuristic viewpoint on a 3 year outlook.
Okay, well, I think the 1 year outlook is, again, it's going to be very dependent on what the travel restrictions are. So paying attention and looking at that. But similarly, I would say also contributing to that conversation through our communities, through our associations, to be, you know, putting out and having those discussions with safety. So look, I think what we're actually looking at is a situation of the next 3 to 6 months. I don't know about precisely staycations, but certainly nanocations and short breaks and traveling locally is going to be where it is. And one of the things that's interesting is we talked about the profitability of the international market. You talked about that in your intro, Greg. But one of the things that I think we probably as an industry tend to underestimate is the low-hanging fruit has always been domestic tourism. For example, in Australia, out of every $100 spent on tourism in Australia, 78 cents of that are spent by domestic tourists.
Wow!
But that travel was, you know, all the big glamour stuff was the international stuff. You know, that was where all of the focus was. That was where all of the big campaigns are. 7-8 years ago, domestic tourism was actually taken off our national tourism organization, and it was devolved down to the states and territories. And the big challenge with that is not that we don't have very capable states and territories, we do, but their job's to grab share of the pie. It's not to grow the share of the pie. To grow the pie. And I think that's what we need to be looking to, Destination Canada and all of those guys while we open up, is how can we grow the pie, but also how can we get people to fall in love with where they live.
Yes.
So,
yes.
I mean, what's funny about the fact that, the rest of the world loves traveling to Canada. But Canadians want to go overseas, and the same with Australians. I did some work I began doing about 14 years ago. We actually had to change the language about how we asked people in focus groups about domestic tourism, because we talked to them about holidays. They told us they hadn't taken any.
Okay.
Because they literally didn't count, a weekend to go to a local wine region as a holiday. So I think one of the things that we've absolutely got an historic opportunity to reposition domestic tourism and bring to it the excitement that we bring to international travel. I mean, Canada has amazing world-class experiences. Your Indigenous experiences, for example. You guys are some of the leaders in doing some of that fabulous Indigenous tourism. This is something we actually look to you in, that you have. We have no treaty with our Indigenous people in Australia. There's never been a settlement on that. You were first to use language like talking about First Nations, which is how I now talk about the First Australians and First Nations of Australia. So you've got those amazing experiences and amazing stories. You've got absolutely gorgeous nature. You've got very diverse communities. If you look at East Canada and West Canada, totally different experiences. And why are we not more excited about that? I know many years ago, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Australian writer Clive James.
No.
Who left, he was a writer and a poet and a television presenter. He left Australia and moved to London and lived there basically until he died. He did a TV series called Postcards From, and he went back to his hometown, which is now my hometown, Sydney, and did a postcard from there and was blown away by what he saw. And he couldn't understand why he couldn't see that when he lived there. And he said, sometimes when it's all you can see, you can't see it. But now we can look at that and say, let's do that. I mean, for example, we've been allowed out to go and walk in lockdown here. So I've been, varying which friends I go with to keep within the social distancing laws. But we've been walking 1.5 meters apart around our local neighborhoods, and we've been taking each other on little tours of our neighborhoods.
Oh, I love it.
Nice.
I've discovered that the local pub near my home, one of Australia's bush poets, Henry Lawson, wrote one of his most famous poems looking out of the window of the pub there at the station opposite. I've discovered, Indigenous, little local Indigenous site. I knew there was a massacre site near my home, near the place where I kayak. But I now know about an Indigenous settlement there that's being restored and done. So, I think we've all had this chance to look locally, and we need to build that love and that localness in. Because interestingly, local has been a trend way back before COVID-19. Local travel, travelers were saying we want local experiences. But I think we need to love our local experiences. And a really great example of this here in Australia, there's a region just south of Sydney called the Southern Highlands. And their entire campaign for all their tourism marketing is built on insights that we put together with them about the visiting friends and relatives market that they expanded out. And that, it's all built on this idea of local love and local advocacy. But what they also saw when they did that local advocacy and they recruited people to sharing their stories was they saw increased local spend as well. So I think that that's where we need to be really looking at this and not seeing it as a lost opportunity. Oh my God, no international visitors, but something that's really going to build capital and social capital for the places that we live in. And like I say, I mean, it's just so many beautiful places in Canada that I think about all the places that I visited. You know, going to Montreal, going to Quebec, going up into the mountains, Mont Tremblant up
Oh,
on the
yes.
east coast, just gorgeous. And you know, your own, and you know, in West Canada, I probably know West Canada more for I'm a skier, so you know, Whistler, Banff, Jasper, all of those places, and you know. But I looked at them and thought these are amazing places in summer. So Whistler now has more summer visitors than winter visitors even before that. But you know that we feel welcome. Now I don't know if you guys have seen what our neighbours across the Tasman have been doing, because they like us are starting with domestic, and they've just launched a campaign which I'd urge your listeners to go out and check out, called Try Something New New Zealand. And they've used their international branding, the 100% Pure New Zealand.
Okay.
And it launched just earlier this week formally. And they've got Kiwis talking to Kiwis about doing this.
Yeah.
And, you know, sitting there, how many people do you ever hear say among your community saying, well, we live in the best country in the world? I bet Canadians feel that too.
We actually hear that a lot.
Quite a bit.
Yeah. And then you kind of go, well, you know, and that's what they're actually saying. And they've got Kiwis talking about what their dream New Zealand trips are. And some of that's things like they're talking about doing some of New Zealand's great long distance trails, which in a normal time you'd be pretty stuck getting on one of those trails. Like the Milford track is like booked out 2 years in advance.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was interesting is when they did their research on this, one of the things they felt was that locals often had felt locked out of going and doing some of these iconic experiences in their own country. And now that's what they were saying was, well, you know, this is your chance to do it, and your chance to retake it back. And take back ownership of your country, because I'm guessing you also have some destinations. I know Vancouver, for example, is a great example of the challenge of verging on over tourism.
Yep.
And that this is also that opportunity for us to re-engage communities. And Greg, before we were on, you were talking about how some communities are almost kind of rejecting tourists because of the risk of COVID.
Yep.
That's because we haven't felt like our communities, all of us haven't felt like our communities own where we're from and own that hosting experience. And I think that that's what we need to be rebuilding in now, is that by rebuilding that sense of ownership in our places, that it's not, these aren't tourist experiences, these are our experiences.
Yes.
And I mean, one of the things, what's the thing that I most often hear that people talk about is the welcome from locals. You know, if that's not there and that's not missing and that's not coming from the heart, then well, with the possible exception of France, which is the only country in the world that is renowned for, everyone says it's great to go to France apart from the people. But that is a brand positioning that I think France can embrace and do something with.
You could actually have fun with that.
Yes. So I think you can have fun with that, but that's not who you guys are welcoming, you know, quietly welcoming, you know, giving visitors space. There's lots of stuff that you can do with that to take that space. So I'm actually really excited about domestic tourism getting the recognition that it deserves.
You know, it's funny you bring this up. We just prior to COVID, we developed this program. It's called Community Experience. And we did an 18-month pilot project on it in this one region within British Columbia. And what it involves is all the locals get together. We give them through a massive training process and treat them how to show what important of content marketing, how to do content marketing from the basics to up. And we get the locals who from the nonprofit, event planners, small businesses, tourism groups, they now are part of a group. They create content every month targeting search terms on search engines, and they're bragging about their community. They're the guest, they're the host, they're the information source. So it's two things why it's growing is in this COVID, we actually we had 4 new content marketers from the community approach us saying we want to be part of this program. And then COVID hit, boom. And then we had, well, now what's happening is we're out there, we're talking to other communities. Actually, we had a region in Australia contact us that we sent a package to. This is how the program works. And it's exactly your point, Caroline. They're telling their stories, they're telling their experiences, and that gives you that personal attachment and that personal connection. And I bang on, I think you're bang on with that one.
Well, it's interesting because Tourism Bay of Plenty have been one of the leaders in this in New Zealand, and they talk about guests. We stopped talking about visitors because visitors, the language we use is really important. So they've talked about guests. Amsterdam and Copenhagen now talk about everyone being a local.
Yeah.
And what they've done with that is to say everyone has a stake in this place.
Yeah.
And it's that stake in place that I think that is what's important, because our locals will welcome people if they feel those people are coming respectfully. And I'm sure you have many of those problems as well, that visitors don't always behave as they should because they're focused in on how great it is for them, not on what the impacts in their community are. But I think if you feel like you're a local, even if you're a local for a day, you've got that sense of care, and that flows into this kind of virtuous circle. So I think your activity, that community activity you're talking about, is absolutely spot on, and that's what we've got to be doing.
I totally agree. I think it's the way to go, and I think the analytics, and based on what you're saying, I think that's a good economical way, yet effective way to market your community. I'm going to go to the next question here, Caroline, because there's I wish we could have you for we should have a day marathon Carolyn Childs show. What do you think, Paul?
Oh, definitely a good plan.
I'm sure you've got you guys have lots of great guests. I think we should shrink the Pacific more often, though, I think.
I totally agree. Yes, we've been very fortunate to have guests from around the world who have shared their insights. Beyond seeing, tourism in the past was a lot about seeing beautiful places, having different memories, but has COVID, in a way, Caroline, sort of given tourism a second chance at reinventing itself in a bit? Say for over-tourism as one, for the different type of opportunities that we're dealing with, because we got over-tourism in hotspots in Canada. We got Banff, Vancouver, Toronto, Quebec City, Halifax. These are over-tourism hotspots. Is this giving us an opportunity maybe to retrain ourselves or reframe our industry on the importance of spreading that tourism dollar to small and rural communities as well as these hotspots?
Absolutely. I think the thing is to make sure that we're not so driven by the short-term thing that we lose focus on that. Because I actually think if we don't take that opportunity, we've wasted this crisis. Because those tensions were there. And one of the things that's been quite interesting to me, I know, Greg, you've been great in joining, as you said, some of the webinars we've been talking about. One of the themes that's really emerged to me was, once we sat down and thought about it, we realized actually things weren't so great before. And a lot of the way we talked about it was not in a very human language. Yeah. It was, it was always about X% growth, and, we talked about dollars, but we talked about dollars of revenue. We never talked about dollars of cost. And I think that's one of the problems that we've seen in tourism is the dollars. Not all of them, because tourism is a great contributor to local economies, and I think that's one of our strengths. Yes. Is we're a great contributor of dollars, and we're a great contributor of jobs, particularly jobs across the spectrum. We tend to disregard that, the Saturday job in, the local cafe and think badly of that. And I think we absolutely shouldn't. I remember somebody from Texas A&M University telling me it's something like more than 90% of Fortune 100 CEOs had their first ever paying job in tourism, hospitality, frontline roles like that.
I believe that.
And it's also, those are the jobs that mean your kids don't need to move away. So I think really all of those things are there. They do bring that, but we didn't talk about it as being about community, and we didn't talk about it as being about pride of place. And local communities were bearing a disproportionate share of the cost of that. Who's cleaning up the rubbish? Whose beauty spots, who is it that can't get their little car park out in front of, the local supermarket or the local bar because there's no space to park? Who's clearing up the rubbish? So I think we've got that chance to sit down and say, we want something different and better. And again, I'd be looking across the Tasman at what our colleagues in New Zealand are saying, that they've actually explicitly said, this is what we're going to do. We are going to look at tourism differently.
I like that.
And like you, I mean, a lot of their tourism dollars were coming in from overseas. They still had a big domestic market, but it was a lot more, even it was kind of hyper local as it was. But there was this sense that the community was feeling adrift from tourism. So they said, we're going to do this better. And in a way, they kind of had to, because if your message is 100% pure and some of your most iconic rivers you can no longer drink the water, you've got to live by that. And I think that's also something I'd say is true for Canada, because we know that the Canadian personality is rooted in the Canadian landscape. That purity, that honesty. And I think that's, if we lose that, we've got that. And I mean, we talked about the resilience of COVID-19 with the bushfires. If Australia is one of the most climate change exposed countries in the world. Events like this year used to be something you saw once in 100 or 150 years. We could possibly, if we don't change how we do things, we could be looking at those being something that happen every 5 years. Our bushfire season used to be 3 months. It's now 5 to 6 months. Began last August, which is our winter. I mean, I have to admit, our winter is not quite like your winter. I now moan when the temperature drops below 10 degrees centigrade.
Get out the skis and the snowboards.
We're about to hit our ski season. So I think if we don't seize this opportunity to change, then change is going to get forced on us. We can expect, if we don't change, to see more pandemics. We've actually been exceptionally lucky that it took so long for a major pandemic to hit us. But the advice from the scientists is, if we don't change how we do things, a warming climate, taking away, invading nature, if we don't start to think about things more holistically, then we can expect to see more pandemics. We can expect to see more, you would call them wildfires, we would call them bushfires. We can expect these issues to get worse.
Okay. Okay, so here's a question. With the current situations and with the projected track that we see going with COVID, being that you are a strategist, and with us, we have a ton of small and rural tourism businesses in this country. Basically, most of our population lives on 200 kilometers from the US border and up, and then the rest of the country is tourism la la land. It's heaven for anyone who likes outdoor adventure tourism. So if you are one of these, and this is who we hear from a lot from across the country, is if you operate a small tourism company, say an adventure company, a kayak, canoe, backpacking, ATV company, who relied heavily on the international traveler, what advice would you give them on how to, and I don't like this word, I don't like pivot at all. I think it's not a good word. How do you think, what would you tell them on what sort of projection or what sort of plan or reframing of their business would they need to do to go from an international to a domestic market in a quick heartbeat?
Okay, well, I mean, the first thing I would say is, well, actually, normally we can't really do that on this call, but normally I would start by listening and getting to know that business and understanding who they are. And in all of this, I think there are two sides to it. One is who you are, and you should never lose that in what you're trying to do. But then start thinking about who is your customer in this current environment. Do you have any local customers who've done things with you? Who have you already got in your databases and networks and systems? Now, we know that historically international tourists have their price points are higher. But you know what if you created a locals rate? So you didn't bake that into your pricing for the future, because I'm not a big fan of the first answer. But what if you did a locals rate for people to say, come and try us, or something that uses that language of French and connection, that connection to place that you've got. What if you did something with that? Or the other thing I'd say is the first people we're going to go and see, and this is universal almost everywhere in the world, is the first thing is, even if we can't touch the people we love, we are hungry for connection, and we are hungry for connection to the people we care about. So looking at your host communities, I mean, I'm guessing if you look at, let's say, because you can travel within each province, can't you, in Canada at the moment?
Yeah. Yeah. To some extent, basically, yeah, there is a sort of a travel thing. Officially, campgrounds aren't open until June 1st. So we're just starting to take the steps to see how it all pans out. But I think June 1st is our big opening day of travel.
Okay, well, here's the thing. This one of the first things is we're all going to go and stampede to see our friends and family. Now, my guess is most of your regional and rural communities would know someone in a larger population center who is visiting friends and family. So get your local community, do something with hosting.
Okay.
Get them targeting. I mean, actually, I'm a big fan of people tend to think of VFR as kind of poor relation of tourists from elsewhere. It's absolutely not, because apart from anything else, these are repeat visitors. They're going to come back and come back. And I don't know how it is when you go and visit your family. I mean, it's not that I don't love my family, I do, but I don't just want to sit on the couch and drink bloody coffee all day.
Yep.
So this is where it's something like, if you're hosting friends and family, could you bring them out to do things? So I think that's something very early to do. The other thing is there's some really great examples of, if you need to reach people further afield, are there things or skills that you can be teaching people where you can do something? So let's take an example. I don't know if you're familiar with a company called G Adventures.
Yes.
An adventure travel company.
Mr. Poon.
Yes, Mr. Poon. They've got virtual tours at the moment, but what they're doing is they're packaging that up with food and wine, for example. So you can order the experience and you can ship that out. So if you're a local adventure travel company, do you use local cookies that you're giving people when they're on the trek? Have you got your own trail mix? Could you mail that out to people and take them on a tour? A really great example of this I've seen is the Faroe Islands. They've actually got someone walking around the Faroe Islands carrying a camera, and you can take control of the camera for 15 minutes.
I love it.
Nice.
And he did say he said he's getting a bit tired because everyone always wants him to jump and run rather than walk. But as a way to showcase what you do and be marketing in that kind of medium term as things open up, that's really great assets. You're creating stories and assets. You're getting great research on what people want to see and do, apart from run and jump.
Yeah.
But as I say, if you start with your host communities, if you start looking at those things. Now, I was on a webinar, Greg, I think you may have heard Tammy Marshall.
Yes.
She and I have been talking a lot. So I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to see if I can get this in front of the screen there.
Okay,
so they talked about the 5 C's of survival. So start with the customer. Be creative. You don't like the pivot. Let's talk about creativity. What are some new ways you can package up? Have a look at everything that's in your business and say, is it something I can start selling? Can you get yourself into Animal Crossing New Horizons marketing something?
Okay.
What is it that you can do to pull some commitment from people? Now, an example from, let's learn from the big guys, because, I always like to say one thing we can do as small guys is look at what the big guys do, let them have paid all the money to do all the big expensive research and trial and fail for us, and then steal their ideas. On the good writers borrow and great writers steal idea. P&O, even in normal times, does a $1 cruise booking. So that, what can you do that says, let's get some commitment from people right now so that there's something they can do, that you've got that coming through and you can really build that commitment right now.
Excellent.
So that's the other thing is, we have pushed a little bit down the hierarchy of needs. This is very interesting because adventure travel is obviously, it's fairly high up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's about self-actualization. You are going to need to be very transparent about what your processes are around health and safety and how you're doing that, so people are coming to you. you are also going to need to be flexible. So you're going to have to put a commitment in to get commitment from the customer on a small scale, but your commitment to them is if things go pear-shaped, if the borders close, if suddenly no one can travel more than 10 kilometers, what's your process for getting them their money back? So building trust with them. And what are the things that your local, the people who can travel to you, what do they share with your international visitors? I'm absolutely sure domestically in Canada, there are cultural explorers like me who would love to be on your kayak trips. Can you work with a local kayak trip? Can you partner with people who do what you do? For example, can you partner with, do you have a local outdoor shop where you can put something together with them to do stuff? So if people are walking in, like me on one famous walking trip when I lived in the UK, I halfway down the motorway, I realized I'd forgotten my walking boots. Yep. So somebody's walking in to buy something in a local shop. Is there something you can be doing to promote there or partner with one another? So that's another thing. Is who are the people who can help? Who can help one another? Who are the people who can help? And it's got to be reciprocal, but who can you help to do that? And I think the other thing that we've really seen, and this is really, really important, Greg, I think you liked my post about how what we've been doing in COVID has confused the algorithms. Make sure the language you're using is both three things. It's about who your customer is, it's about who you are, never lose who you are, and it's about where their mindset is. So, we've heard this talk about revenge travel. I don't really like that we're going to be making up for lost time. But, somebody who loves doing adventure travel, what's the language that they're going to be using right now and talking about that? And I can think, we've been talking here about ISO fever. Australians, there's no word Australians can't reduce to 1 to 2 syllables, I have to say. So, what is ISO fever going to look like for someone who loves adventure travel? You're going to be talking to them about freedom. You're going to be talking to them about liberation. You're going to be talking to them about unlocking things and openness and all of those things. So what is the mindset that you're talking to in the language? You're not going to be talking to them, if you're a little cozy country restaurant, I'd be talking about hunkering down and getting cozy and getting close. But you're going to be talking to them about, getting out and opening up to the world. So that's your adventure travel company. That would be what I'd be doing.
And just a side note, what channels would you be funneling this information down, Carolyn?
Okay, well, social media channels for me are about inspiration. People are transacting there, but you do need to remember that there is a sizable proportion of your market who is still just reading interesting stuff while sat on the toilet. Yep. Particularly if they're rationing their toilet paper. So I think I would use your social channels to be sharing those conversations and looking at what response gets out there. It's very, very difficult to get organic reach unless you're going to pay. So if you want to, there is a pay to play in there, but have a look at what you're paying for. So if you're using things like AdWords, if you're using things like paid social posts, make sure that you are triggering it around interest points, not just pushing it out at everybody. So start with the inspiration piece, then lead people down a track to invite them to respond and share conversations, then move on. And that's what your social channels should be about. Your own channels, your website. How are you using your website? And how, if you're bidding for things like AdWords, one thing we like to say is bid for words that Google isn't going to charge you too much for. And those words you own.
Yeah. I think the other thing too is if you do have skills in search engine optimization, you can create authentic content that will show up on the first page of search engines. It's a lot harder work. It's a lot bigger process. But I think, again, another thing is with the small community, that's an option there too, is to, I'm a big proponent that in this time we up our skills. We increase our skill levels, we self-train, we get our mindset about going back to school, because it is going to be a new industry. You are going to need more skill sets to operate around these parameters and to sort of find your niche within them. So I really liked what you had to say tonight. And Colin, what do you think?
I think, Caroline, you did awesome.
Awesome.
Thank
Very
you.
impressed, very
Thank you.
informative. I'm going to be taking a few of those hints home and talking to Greg
Yeah.
about it.
Oh, come
Okay.
on. Come on.
Yeah, we'll be having a few discussions.
Yes. So, Caroline, is there anything you'd like to leave with our audience before we let you go?
I think probably you touched on it in your last comment, Greg. Great segue. Thank you. And it wasn't rehearsed, people, honestly. We said we'd freewheel a bit here.
Yes.
Have the courage to fail.
Yep.
Just try shit.
Yes.
And if it
There's a
doesn't
quote.
work, and if it doesn't work out why, take that into the next stage.
Yep.
And it's better to fail trying, I think, than, not everyone will succeed. And be a bit kind to yourself. That's the other thing I would say is, your business can't survive without you, but neither can you. You can live without your business. Your business can't live without you. So be kind to yourself.
Yes.
I think we didn't really get to talk about that, but just practice self-care. We are the most important assets. I'm a small business person like many of yours. We're a two-person company with lots of great friends and partners like you.
I'd like to say thank you for joining us, and we're going to have to let you go, but we will be in touch, and we will keep in touch. But again, hi, Air 5 to Caroline, Colin. Air 5.
Yeah.
Air 5. There you go.
Air 5,
Okay.
yeah. Elbow bumps.
Elbow bump.
Well, there you go.
There you go. Thank you, Caroline, and we'll let you go now, but thank you very much, and you're more than welcome to watch the rest of the shows. Thank you again, Caroline.
I will. I'll probably stay on the line for a little and listening. So thank you for inviting me, and bonjour, au revoir, see you soon.
Merci. So that was our special guest tonight. That was Carolyn Childs, strategist, futurist, and founder of mytravelresearch.com. Make sure you write that down. I'm just going to put that back on the screen here because Caroline is full of knowledge, and she has have her, I guess, her stamp on a lot of tourism out there in the global hemisphere. So again, thank you, Caroline, for joining Colin and I. Colin, a little bit on our favorite two favorite ending to the show real quick is our shameless plug.
Yeah.
And just a reminder to everyone, if the ehCanada site, we are a planning and a booking site. It's 18,000 pages of information, 16,000 photos and videos, and it's also a contribution site. So if you got a story or an experience to sell, or you got something to tell us, come on, register yourself as an adventure ambassador online and start telling your story and building up your profile on our ehCanadaTravel.com site. Secondly, our blog, keep a watch there as Caroline. We will be blogging with Caroline for the second portion of the May month. And also we will be putting up our June lineup, which as like Caroline, Colin, is quite the impressive. We got a bestseller author. We got a CEO coming. We have the head of the polling company of Canada who does all the tourism polling. We've got a really good lineup coming up, and right up there on that high bar that we set here in the Canuck TV world, along with Carolyn Childs. So what we will finish with now is our favorite feature call, unless you want to throw something in there.
I'm pretty excited about the whole show and the upcoming lineup.
Yep.
Like you say, our ratings are keep going up, and looking good.
And thank you everyone for your support. We're very impressed with the analytics. We're really impressed with the views that our shows are getting across all 10 of our formats. We're really happy with the follows and the increase in our followership as we have. This is all organic. We don't go buy followers. We don't bribe them with beaver tails and ice cream. We earn every follower, and we're very happy to have them on board. Thank you for joining us, and we're just going to finish off with our isolation vacation. And again, with the isolation vacation, we've traveled. We took 10 years. We traveled. We did a 10-year study in Canada. We went to over 1,000 communities. And what we want to do, since we are in self-isolation, is we're going to share some of our favorites. And one of my favorites, unfortunately, Colin didn't come on this trip. He was coding and building. One of my favorites.
Invited?
Probably not.
Was I invited, really?
No, I don't think I even invited you. I might have drove by you and you were hitchhiking, and I just said,
Right,
forget
yeah.
that noise, and I moved on. Yeah, forget that. So with our, I think it's Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia. Very out of the way place, long drive from the north of the BC province. It is a home of dinosaur. They just got a new dinosaur museum there because there's a lot of fossils found there. But what really got me, which I did not know until we went, was the abundance of waterfall hikes. Over 8, I think, of different hikes that lead to a really remote waterfall. So everyone, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for coming on the show. Thank you again to Caroline. Next week, join us for Dan Lefebvre, who will be joining us. He's a business coach, #1 best-selling author. Live the Life of Your Dreams is his book. And please come and join us next week, Tuesdays, 7 p.m. PST, Canuck time. And we're happy that you join us on the hit A-Travel Talk Show. And leaving you, we're going to show you our clip and Colin's chest. That's not part of tourism, Colin's chest.
It's the logo.
Oh, all right. I am Canadian and double. I love it. That's one of our, if you go to our big online shopping mall, which we don't have up yet, but we're working on it, you'll be able to get one of these shows. So again, here we are in Tumbler Ridge. Please enjoy. Remember what we want. Stay safe, stay positive, stay real. Play later on ehCanadaTravel.com. Thank you from the brothers, and thank you again, Caroline, for joining our show.